Next, we're going to talk about adding interactivity to your web pages in a couple different forms. We're going to be lightly covering some JavaScript elements as well as behaviors. And these items can help you change visual content of a website. These can include sleek drop-down menus. They can include the ability to produce pop-up windows or interactive elements that your visitor can hover over or manipulate by entering a field or something along those lines. So JavaScript itself has grown quite a bit from the simple language that was behind pop-up windows many years ago. It can allow now for you to change the content on a web page as you're looking at it without having to reload a new screen. As an example that you've probably used, think of Google Maps. You can click and drag the map and it will automatically update whatever is in the area that you're now bringing into view, and you don't have to refresh or visit a new page in order to display the content you want to see. So that's kind of an example of what you're going to be capable of doing. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, JavaScript is a programming language that web browsers understand. When a browser opens a web page that has a JavaScript program in it, it reads that script and performs the indicated actions, whatever those happen to be. JavaScript isn't a part of HTML, but you use it to manipulate HTML elements on a page, okay? So for an example, web designers can use JavaScript to show or hide parts of a web page. So as an example, if you think of a photo gallery that has many small thumbnails or icons of images, and then when you click it, it displays that image larger and replaces whatever the main picture happens to be. That's an example that can be used there. Now, when you add a jQuery widget to a page, Dreamweaver automatically produces a jQuery assets folder where it stores all of the content pertaining to that object on your root folder. So the web page itself, Dreamweaver will write in the links to all the associated files in your head content, kind of like what happens when you attach a style sheet. And that way, Dreamweaver will write the link so that guests can trigger those actions. You don't have to know JavaScript to be able to use some of these functions. So in order to insert something in, I'm going to go to Insert. And typically we're starting on HTML, but if you click that little drop down, there's an option here called jQuery UI, User Interface. I'm going to click that. And this gives me a list of different items that I can bring in to allow for you to insert interactivity that your visitor can work with onto your web page. I'll go ahead and click where I want to insert this item. So I'm clicking after my header here. And I'll start with some collapsible content. So I'll pick the accordion. It's going to ask me to save the document before inserting these items. I'll say OK. And you'll notice that it's placed some content in there for me. If I scroll down, you're going to notice that it has created its own div and gave it an ID of accordion 1. And it's breaking up each of its sections. We've got section 1, section 2, section 3, and each section has its own content. And I'll click on live just so we can kind of get a view. So this is what it looks like in live view. And you'll notice that as I click on each section, it adds a little animation in. It's got a nice gradient here, and it just slides between each section and changes the color. So the orange represents whatever the active section is, and the blues represent sections that are closed. In design mode, it shows the same thing. You can see the color codings displaying as well. If I click on each of these, though, it's going to give you the option to alter it. like change the name, but it won't give you the option to see that. That's where these little eyeballs come into play. If I click that, it's going to show whatever that panel's content happens to be. So accordion displays are awesome because they let you stuff a lot of information into a really small amount of screen real estate. So if you're worried about overwhelming your guests with information, this is a great way to let you hide content until your viewers opt to review or see that information. So let's throw some content in as an example. I'll actually open up an old page and grab some lorem ipsum. So I'll just grab all this stuff that we had used previously, copy it, and I'm just going to paste it in. So I'm just cutting and pasting what I do and don't want to include just to kind of minimize it a little bit. So now you'll notice that this extends all the way down, and when I get to the next item, it will adjust and rearrange the visual. Everything slides. This is a lot of information kind of crammed in, but it adds in the animation on your behalf. You don't have to do anything additional to make this look nice. It does adjust in terms of width automatically. It is placed into a div. So if you did want to look at it on a narrow screen, that will automatically work. And these are great if you think about, practical applications that you could use for something like this. Think about like a frequently asked questions. You might have a lot of questions, and displaying the questions and answers, you'd have to do a lot of skimming to find what you like. So you could just list the questions as the title of each section, and then the answer will display whenever it's clicked on. So that's a good practical use of an item kind of like this. If I come up to the top, you're going to see a few reference links. JavaScript's being used for those interactive fonts. If you recall, we had some styled fonts that we'd brought in previously, so jQuery or Java's being used there as well. And if I click on my jQuery accordion, come down and look at the properties panel. This is going to give you additional options to manipulate. So for instance, if I wanted to rearrange the items in my panels, maybe I want fish on top and then meat beneath it, I can rearrange those as I work. I can also add by clicking the plus sign, and it will add an additional panel for me. And put it up at the top in this case. You can specify which one of them is going to be active, and the event is referring to what is going to cause it to function. Right now it's set to click, so if I click on one of these, that's going to be what initiates the motion or the animation. If I switch it to mouse over, all I have to do is hover over it and then it begins to move. In this instance, I probably wouldn't say use a hover over just because it does become difficult to navigate when you can't move your mouse without losing what you were attempting to read. But it does give you some flexibility there. You can also specify what type of animation you would like. Swing is what it's set to now, but you can do a few other options as well, and these kind of pertain to the type of motion that it might have. This number is in milliseconds, I think. So 4/100ths of a second is how long it takes for that animation to complete. You'll also notice header and active header. These are going to give you some options as far as visuals. So that's referring to this little symbol right there. So right now it's triangle. So 1E, I guess, is the header triangle, and the active header is the 1S. So if I wanted to switch that, let's see, let's try arrow and arrow. What that might look like. So see, now it's turned it to a little arrow as opposed to a little triangle. In order to have everything, oh, that's right, it is triangle, arrow. There we go. So a down pointing arrow versus a sideways pointing arrow. And these are all, again, these are presets. If you want to dig really deeply into customization, you can actually bring in your own visuals also. That becomes a little bit complicated, but it is an option. You aren't stuck dealing with whatever the presets happen to be. And also, in relation to Dreamweaver kind of taking the reins and letting you, not requiring you to know any of the JavaScript or the jQuery, take a look up here at the top. You've got our CSS, but then we've got the core information that helps it function. We've got theme information, the accordions. It put in all of its own JavaScript and CSS to make sure that this reacts the way that you expect it to react. So it does take all that work off of you. If we come into our CSS designer and take a look, again, here are the two style sheets that we produced. And then if we come down and click on these, you can start to look at what some of these items pertain to. So if you decided you wanted to maybe alter the appearance of some of these, you would want to come into the theme right here, and this is going to help you alter the colors, for instance. So as an example, if I wanted to switch it from being blue and orange to maybe instead of the orange, I want to pick the red that's working with the rest of my file, I'm going to click around until I can figure out where, all right, so the header, here's where that orange color is coming from. So if I wanted to use this instead, I'd click that and it switches. And there's usually multiples. Like, see how there's a few different instances where the styles are going to have the colors popping up. So just fixing one isn't going to do it. I'm going to have to go in and tweak a few of them. So let's see. Widget header, state hover. So we'll pick color picker again. Grab my red. The yellow is the outline here. So I might just pick a bright red outline in that case. This is the hover over orange. So you see how that's a much deeper orange, and you can see the red is starting to work there as an outline, but it's not showing here. So these pertain to what the active item is, what's the open one, and which ones are the closed ones. So right now, the changes that I'm making here, these two are pertaining to the closed icons. These ones down at the bottom, not pertaining to the one that's open. So it does require a little bit of searching to assess what you want your end result to wind up looking like. There we go. We're starting to make some forward momentum. There we go. So I changed it from being orange to the red. And if you're not sure what's affecting that particular item, click on it because it's going to tell you what selectors are being used so that you can kind of narrow it down here versus clicking through like I am currently. Be aware they plug in a lot of styles. So you are completely encouraged to customize this to your liking, but be aware that it might be time consuming. And so if this is something you're going to use, I would highly recommend allowing yourself enough time to kind of pick through this and assess what it is that you'd like to alter to make sure that it fully is customized to whatever your web design is laid out to be. It shouldn't look like the jQuery elements that we're bringing in are separate from the rest of your website. It needs to be cohesive. You can disable an accordion. That's what this little checkbox is here. But that pretty much defeats its purpose. When it's disabled, it's displaying, but guests can't open up the collapsed sections. So unless you want to kind of keep something off limits for now, don't check disabled. Collapsible represents that you can choose this to allow your visitors to close all of the accordion's panels at once. So if I turn that on and go back to live, if I click it, it will close and just show a list. So this would work really well for like I suggested, a frequently asked questions or something along those lines. And then when it's clicked on, it will open. So as I mentioned, when you add an accordion, it comes pre-styled. But it is a little bit of a beast to go through everything and decide what you want to change and how to make it look the way that you want it to look. Unfortunately, Dreamweaver itself doesn't really provide an easy way to change a widget's theme, but if you're up for a visit to jQuery's user interface website and have a little time to swap files out, you can do it yourself. I've already pulled that up here. It's jQueryui.com, and it gives you the opportunity to actually build your own themes. So you can adjust font settings, corner radius, colors, what you want highlights or your active height or whatever to be, and it will kind of preview it for you here. You've got icons, what sliders would look like. You also have options. Here's where you download the theme. But you also have options of pre-made galleries also. So you can click on one, it'll give you a preview of something that's already been produced. Not all of these are very attractive. Like that green one was pretty rough. But it does give you the ability to take a look at things that have already been pre-made and then go in and tweak the colors further yourself. So if you are going to go the route of using the theme roller to kind of adjust yourself, I do want you to make something, but if you want to start with an item in the gallery and then edit that on your own, that's also totally okay. And again, the book does cover how to go about doing this. So that would be your collapsible panel, but there are other options as well. For example, and I'll get past that, there's also an option for tabbed content. Same general concept, but instead of working with panels that are all stacked and collapsing, again, this is all on a single, all within a div. It's, again, allowing you to condense content. If you take a look at how each one works, both in live and in design mode, you click the eye to display the next item over. And the way that you'd edit it in like the properties panel, same content. Essentially, you can rearrange which panels front or towards the front or the back. You can align it differently if you want it horizontal or vertical. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So now the tabs are to one side as opposed to being across the top. Again, you get to choose the event if you'd like, and you can hide or show or include an animation. Let's try that. just put a quick bit of information on each of these. There we go. So it's almost like someone's opening and shutting shutters, like they're opening and shutting. So that's what blind represents. And each one of these animations does something different. It might move, drop from the top, fade from one to the next. Some of them are going to be better than others. Shake makes it move from side to side, which isn't really attractive, but there are plenty of options here for you to completely customize these to animate or alter. But really, if you saw what I was doing with the drop-down accordion, the way that it functions with the tabs is almost the same. So it's pretty easy. And again, it does put in all of its own source code. It puts in its JavaScript. It puts in the behavior controlling the animation that we just altered. You can alter that if you want to go in and manipulate the CSS. You can do that as well. Just pay attention to which style sheet you're dealing with, because tabs is the one that you would be using for this. And it gives you a lot less styles to have to worry about for certain aspects, but it still pertains to the overall theme. You can actually see how it's picking up the style that I made, where I made the change to make it show red instead of that orange color. So both these different items are still using the jQuery UI theme produced. So if you did use the theme roller on the jQuery UI website and you wanted to use different types of widgets brought in through jQuery, they would automatically take on those styles visually in terms of colors, fonts, shapes being used, etc. There are a few other options here. I'm actually going to show you, since I have this website open. Each one of these is offered here as well. We went over the accordion here. Checkbox and radio buttons are going to be kind of like this. That's a checkbox, that's a radio button. And then here's an example of a typical button right here. Tabs we just went over. Date picker. This basically lets you make a little calendar. So if, as an example, a visitor wanted to come in and schedule something with a client and you're designing that client's website, it would give you the option to set that up. Let me just delete a few of these. There we go. So if I wanted to maybe add a date picker, I'll go ahead and click that here. As usual, it's going to assign it its own ID. You can specify how you want that to lay out. So how do you want the date to appear? And what language you'd like to display. Whether or not you give them the option to change the month or the year. Let's give that a test. And now it gives you a 3-month range, 3 months at a time to schedule out, essentially. I only want to display one, so that'll work. But it's pretty easy to use. If you wanted to add in a jQuery pop-up messages, it could be something about, in this case, my bacon website. I have links about different items we offer. I might want to have a pop-up image pop up to display that, oh, we're having a sale. Don't miss out on our Black Friday sale, something along those lines. Now, again, keeping in mind that pop-ups are usually thought of as pesty. You don't want to agitate your viewers too much, but sometimes it can be really good to just notify them of things that are coming up. So just, use it carefully. I'm going to click somewhere on my page. It doesn't really matter where because that pop-up will appear on top of my content. And I'll go to Insert, jQuery UI. And there's an option here called Dialog. It's also right here. It's not going to be called a pop-up, but it's going to add that in as if you recall thinking about the AP divs, the absolute position, this is going to give us the opportunity to sort of control what shows up and how it's going to appear. So it's going to sort of float independently on top. So I'll just type in, Black Friday. We'll say that it expires, December 1st. And I'll go ahead and just format this. I want it to be big. There we go. Now look down here at the properties panel at this. I can specify the width and height of whatever that item is. Its position is being controlled, and I'm allowing it to be draggable, open automatically, close on escape when I hit the escape key, and it's resizable by the visitor. Hide or show. You can add an animation there. Let's do a fade in. And if there's a trigger button, include that. So I've got this all set up. I'll go ahead and set that up to be live. It fades in. Don't miss out on our Black Friday sale. Expires, blah, blah, blah. I can relocate it again because it is absolutely positioned automatically. And when I click the close button, it closes and doesn't come back. Very easy to use. It can be a nice little addition. So some of those animations that we discussed, you'll notice that there's some items down here we clicked on, like it faded into view. And if we come up here, it's showing it here as well. So these are known as behaviors, and you can apply behaviors as well without having this jQuery user interface present. So basically what a behavior is it's a pre-packaged JavaScript program that lets you add interactivity to your pages even if you don't know anything about JavaScript ahead of time. So if you're looking at the God knows how many styles just to make these look nice, and that seems a little daunting, maybe behaviors would be more of your cup of tea. I'll go ahead and just delete some of this extra stuff that I don't think I need. Yep, don't need my tabs. There we go. And I'll just go ahead and throw an image in here. Back to HTML, image, People's Republic of Bacon. All right. So to use a behavior, you need 3 separate things. You need an HTML tag. That can be any tag. In this case, I've got an image tag right here. It could be a UL, it can be an H2, it can be the body tag. Probably wouldn't recommend that one since it'll affect the whole web page, but you can use any tag that you'd like really. Then you need the behavior itself, which is whatever it's going to do. Is it going to fade? Is it going to switch? Is it going to change color? and then an event that gets the ball rolling. So what is it that's going to make the behavior happen? Is it going to be a individual clicking on something, or hovering over an item, or loading a web page? Any of those can be the determining factor of what makes it happen. So the behaviors actually has its own panel like this. By default, it's usually not showing, but if you go to Window, there is a section called Behaviors right here. That opens up the Behaviors panel. And you can dock this with something else if you think you'll use it a lot, but I'll just sort of leave it floating here for right now. And the panel is going to break down each behavior into two sections, events and behaviors. So I'm going to select the item, or in this case, it's going to recognize the tag, and I'm going to click the little plus sign to add a behavior. And it's going to give me options. Do I want to have an effect? When I click here, do I want it to go to a certain URL? Do I want it to open a new browser window? Add a pop-up message? Some of these will be gray, but that's because not every behavior can be used on every tag. So I'll pick effect, and I'll pick shake as an example. So target element, it also likes if you have an ID. So if you don't have an ID set, it's going to pick whatever your current selection is. But the only issue with that is that if I have many images, this is going to affect all of them. It's going to last for 1,000 milliseconds, so that's 1 second essentially. What direction do I want it to do that behavior? It's shaking, so I want it to be left, right, up, or down. I'll pick up. How far I want it to shake and how many times I want it to happen. Okay, so I'll hit all right. So when I click on it, on click, and there are many things that you can use. It could be an error when the page loads, clicks, and hovers are usually the easiest way to do that. So I'll click on that. You'll notice right here, they added in that behavior attached to my image. So they just brought that in as an additional property. On click, we're going to give it the shake effect, and it's going to go up 3 times, 20 pixels for 1 second. So if I boink boink, that's what it does. That is that behavior. Not all behaviors will preview in live mode, but I'm fortunate that this one does. So if I want to change that, I can either double click and change the direction or the distance or how many times it happens. Or I can also change whatever the determining factor that makes it happen. So maybe on click I want double click, or on load. What on load means is when the page loads new, so in a browser, that's going to be when it happens. That's a little trickier to control. You won't be able to see that in live view because it's already loaded. But it does give you options. If I decide, you know what, I don't care for that particular event, I want to have it do something else, you can just delete it and get started again. So I'll click the object, plus sign, effects, highlight, current selection, effect duration. I'll click OK. So on click, it'll highlight. Now you'll notice it's not really doing much. And that's part of the reason is because it's highlighting and it's probably happening behind that picture. So something to keep in mind with behaviors is these events are at the heart of interactive web pages because they trigger behaviors based on your visitors' actions. But not all events will work with all tags. For example, that you can use the onload event with web pages and images only, but not with paragraphs or divs, because paragraphs and divs don't take any time to load, but images and entire web pages of content do. Now, please don't go nuts adding events and behaviors to your pages, because it can make the website a little harder to use, and we've all been on a website that have annoyed us before, so we don't want to do that to our visitors. A few items that are easy to add behaviors to, such as highlighting elements on a page, making an image fade in or out, swapping an image with one for the next. So I'm going to swap this picture with Kevin Bacon. On mouse over, it'll bring out it'll bring out the previous image, and then it'll return it to this image. So that can be a nice addition to swap one picture with another as a rollover, a mouse over, or a mouse out. So, but you will want to add an ID, and it gave it an ID image 1 when I brought this in. So I do recommend adding IDs, even though it needs an HTML tag to function. IDs are also important, and items that are the easiest to add these behaviors to include div tags, images, form items like highlighting a field when someone's typing in it, and other elements kind of like that. If you want it to be applied to text, you have to add an ID to that text, sort of like how I've got the navigation ID here. After you apply an ID to a target tag, you need to specify the event, which is what we've been up to. Go back to design, to alter. So a few of the more popular items that you'll want to be aware of in terms of the effects that you can add. These are going to be the easiest ones to use. Anybody in the effects are going to be helpful. Fade is going to let an image fade in or out. Blind is like drawing blinds up and down from a window. Highlight will allow you to highlight or add a background color to a paragraph, headline, or div that can help it stand out. That might be part of the reason why it wasn't working here. It might have had to do with the fact that I have a background color on some of these items. So that could have been the issue. Shake and bounce kind of go side and side. They're gonna, violently move back and forth for a moment, and that's pretty much it. So short of trying to get someone to pay attention to a certain area, it's probably not great to use often. Slide is kind of like the blind effect, but instead of going vertically, it's going to slide in or slide over something to reveal it. Other options, open browser window. Sometimes when a visitor's action opens a new window, you want to dictate the size of that window. So let's say someone clicks on it and you want to open a new window. URL to display. Keep in mind this needs to have the HTTP and the slashes and such before it. You can control how big that window is in pixels. And you can show what you want it to or not display. Do you want it to include the navigation bar? If yes, great. If not, leave it off. Location toolbar, status bar, menu bar, scroll bars as needed. It can give you the option to control all of that. So when I click OK and give it a preview, it'll still do the rollover, but when I click on it, and I'm in Dreamweaver, so it won't open a browser, but it would click and open in a browser. So let's preview that real quick to give it the visual that we're talking about. There's our swap. When I click, I get a 400 by 400 pixel window of, oh, there we go. But it doesn't give me any of the navigation items. It only displays that page and lets me navigate within it there. As far as image specific options, some things you might want to set up is the preload image option. This can be great because if you know you've used the website, you've used the web before, it takes time to download images from the internet, and sometimes it takes a while to download them if they're pretty big. But once a browser loads an image, it stores that image in its cache so that it doesn't take forever to load every time you go there. So the preload images option here takes advantage of this concept by downloading the images and storing them in your browser's cache before the web page actually needs them. So it makes the images on your website pop up a little faster, especially if you have a return visitor or return customer. So Dreamweaver makes it pretty simple to add interactivity to your web pages without much fuss, and that can be extremely helpful when you're wanting to incorporate additional visual cues or perks into your website. Keep in mind that some of these behaviors, such as the mouse out or mouse over, won't function if you're on a mobile device. So this kind of thing won't work, but you still have the ability to use all of those drop-down menus, the accordion and the tabbed panels. You'll still get the animation associated with that, and certain things kind of like the pop-up that fades in, you'll still be able to do that. It just comes down to whether or not the cursor itself, if it's a rollover, is going to react the way that you want it to. But I do encourage you to incorporate these into your next project.